on this Armed Forces Day with another of our country's preeminent authorities on the condition of the military. I hope he will talk, among other things, as he often does, about the defense industrial capabilities which are essential to supporting that Navy and that Air Force and the other services as well. He is Dr. Daniel Goure. He served in the George W. Bush administration as the director of the Office of Strategic Competitiveness, which was a perfect vantage point for both his skill set and what's needed as we look out at this array of gathering storms. He is today the vice president of a very highly regarded institution in Washington, the Lexington Institute, the author of numerous books and countless articles. He's a co-author of this book, which I commend you as well. It's in the back. It's a strategy for victory in this war we're in at the moment. We call it the Secure Freedom Strategy. It's modeled after the one President Reagan used to defeat the last totalitarian ideology that tried to destroy us. And I'm delighted to welcome back Dan Goure to help us understand this problem as it requires our attention today. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure. It's my first time in Des Moines, so it's a treat for me as well. You've heard a lot of numbers, a lot of facts, a lot of data. It's hard stuff in some ways to really absorb and understand. So rather than giving you more numbers, which I was prepared to do, I want to talk about what does it all mean? What does it mean whether you have a small military or a large one, an old one or a new one? Why should we care? Let's all go home, right? We'll tend to our own business and other people will tend to theirs and everything will be okay. I want to address that. So, today, the United States is a global power with worldwide investments, interests, relationships, and concerns. You heard the numbers, $3 trillion of trade out of about an $18 trillion economy. So if that were to stop because of a war, because the Chinese cut off access to Asia, think of what it means to get a 20% cut overnight in everything that we do, buy, all the money coming in, all the bank loans, and all the rest, right? You know what happens when oil gets blocked off, right? We've seen that. Any number of, heck, all you have to do is to have, a strike somewhere or a shooting somewhere or the Iranians do so. Every time the mullahs do something in Tehran, oil prices go up. So right now, the oil prices are really nice. I'm sure most of you can remember when it was close to $5. At least it was close to $5 a gallon when I was living for maybe not here. So imagine if we cut off the supply of oil to the Gulf, and oil prices triple. If you can get some of you, I remember the days during the first oil embargo. No, it was after the war. Arab states, they said, you know what, don't want to play the game. We're stopping this until prices go the roof. They stopped selling. Price. You couldn't get it. And there were lines from here to the airport trying to go. You want that again? That's one of the things you have to deal with. The U.S. military gets too small to do what it needs to do. Now, the NCC also the leader of the community, like-minded, free and democratic nation, a set of alliance partners and security relationships, and even what passes for a board of directors for the international economic system. U.S. is central, not just to military activities, to economic, diplomatic, political, cultural, social, religious activities in the world, religious interest. Now, we earned that place because we built this world after World War II, and then we spent the next 70 years securing it. Nobody else did. Our allies were either weak nations just putting themselves together, or they were too small, or they were under immediate and local threat. Nobody else did. So we are the nation that built this world. Our power and our presence has been the central structural feature that holds the present international order together. It flavors the very air that fills the sphere that we call the international system, whether it's the size of our economy, our capacity for innovation, the role of the dollar as the world's reserve currency, or the contribution of the U.S. military to the stability and peace in the global commons. The present world order has made in the U.S. stamped on it. And that is terribly important, because if we're not there, there is no order. Nations, like nature, abhor a vacuum. It must be filled. How it gets filled, by whom, and under what circumstances is the challenging question of our time, and I think of the next presidential election. Unlike nature, which seeks to fill a vacuum with whatever is handy, just sucks that stuff in. If you all seen movies with black holes, just sucks that stuff right in. All right? It matters on how this vacuum gets filled. Is it going to be filled by democratic nations, by nations that believe in the free market, in freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of movement? Or is it going to get filled by nations who have other agendas, religious, totalitarian, geostrategic, or whatever? And I would suggest to you that when it comes to maintaining the current order or replacing the current order, there is no substitute for the United States. So as we talk about the size of the military shrinking, we have interests in at least 4 major regions of the world. You can count them out, right? We're interested in Asia. We're interested in Europe. We have concerns in the Middle East, allies, friends, co-religionists, whatever. Latin America. So let me ask the question. The military starts to get smaller. Which region will you choose to abandon, or allow our government to choose to abandon? You know, we've got some members of law enforcement here. Let me put it in terms that are more local. Call 911. How long do you want to wait before they show up? You'd like them to show up before the burglar steals everything you own, or before the intruder can harm you, although maybe it's good enough if they show up and just put the toe tag on the guy. I'll be good with that. Call for the fire department. You'd like them to show up before the house burns down completely. Because the fact is that even if we were to accept that smaller military and pretend that nothing's going to happen in the world, when the bad things come about, when we're cut off from the things that matter to us, the friends that matter to us, relatives in foreign countries that are important to us, we will respond. That we will respond with a military, as you've heard now from 2 speakers, that is too small, too old, not well trained, and not sufficiently equipped. Some of you remember the Korean War. It was brought up just a few minutes ago by Peter. Task Force Smith. We didn't think we were going to fight wars anymore. So Task Force Smith was pulled together when the Korean War started out of garrison troops in Japan who didn't have the right equipment, never had the right training. It was thrown into combat and nearly got themselves killed. In fact, a lot of them did get themselves killed. It was wiped out. Don't want to do that again. Don't want to have those kind of wars start, and certainly do not want to fight those kind of wars again. We talk globally. If there's no security, there's no peace. There's no prosperity, there's no development, and ultimately there is no freedom. This is as true if we're talking for our neighborhoods, our cities, as it is for the world. And therefore, when you ask the question, well, what does it matter whether that military is smaller than it used to be? You know, the Soviet Union is gone. Or it is older than it used to be. Still looks like pretty neat planes and ships and all the rest to me. It matters because this is the world's only global military. It is a military that responds not just to attacks on the United States, but is geared, organized, focused, and deployed to prevent those kind of wars, and certainly prevent attacks upon the United States. And as our adversaries grow in power, as new adversaries or challengers arise, as local hegemons, North Korea, whatever, start to build military capabilities to threaten their neighbors, that size and that capability of that military matters. Because we may not be able to deter the adversary, in which case we'll have to fight them. And if you can't deter them, you can be pretty well sure that that means that your military is not big enough, not well trained enough, not technologically advanced enough to easily fight and win that war. And that ultimately means that a lot of American men and women can die. So ultimately, that's what this is all about. It is investing now to ensure that we don't have to fight and lose a lot of American lives and those of other people that we care about later. Now, is there sort of a right size for this mission? We keep talking about it as if it's, 1,000 is not good, 2,000 is good. There actually is some argument about this. In fact, we had a study done, National Defense Panel, took a look at this current administration's military strategy and forces. This was a bipartisan group, Democrats, Republicans, all experts, and concluded this is last year, concluded this about the shrinking of the size of the U.S. military. Quote, "We feel it is imperative that a global power with worldwide interests, the United States armed forces should be sized and shaped to deter and defeat large-scale aggression in one theater, Europe, Asia, Middle East, while simultaneously deterring and thwarting opportunistic aggression in multiple other theaters." What are we seeing now? Chinese pushing in the Spratlys in East Asia, building bases on islands that were international or owned by other countries. We have ISIS start up, and what happens right after ISIS starts up its activities? Russians move into Crimea, and if that weren't enough, now start moving into eastern Ukraine. These things don't happen one at a time. They tend to happen in groups, in clumps, if you will. We were dealing with Saddam Hussein's Iraq. We were trying to just keep Iraq, remember, under kind of tight wraps, had air patrols and all the rest, and then the North Koreans start doing things. They sinking ships and all the rest. Things don't happen one at a time. So you need a military that is not only capable of fighting a war or deterring it so you don't have to fight it, but can also deal with the regional things that come up. Smaller things where it does matter. Maybe not enough to cause us to send 1 million troops, but cause us to have to respond. We also need to defend the homeland. We need to support drug interdiction and deal with our borders. Military has a role in all of that. Do counterterrorism on a global scale. And if you get new things, who knew Ebola was coming here even 6-9 months ago? You have to have a military can do that. Military cannot be deployed, all of it, all the time. Some of it has to be training. Sometimes you want to give these people a little R&R and let them go home to their families and have some vacations. You need to have them in repair and overhaul. You need to have them in educational courses. As a result, typically, you need 3 of everything. 3 ships, 3 Army brigades, 3 Air Force squadrons to have one continually deployed where you want it to have. One, so if we talk about an army of 450,000, sounds like a big number, and not bad. Only 150,000 of that can actually be deployed, unless we're going to go to all-out war, right? No, we didn't do that in Iraq. We didn't do that in Afghanistan. We kept rotating these people, except for some of the very specialized guys who volunteered, right? Because we couldn't put them through that. We couldn't have them overseas for 10 years at a time. So we had them come home. So you need that military. By the way, not only do you need the force that goes back and forth over a period, you need the guys who are going to be here training. You need the medics over here. Any of you who are veterans who've been dealing with TRICARE, military health care, we have people who are doing other things than that. We have people who don't go overseas because they have permanent jobs here in intelligence. They're the guys who manage all our satellite systems and space launch. And frankly, we're running all the drone operations. Somebody asked about that. We're doing it from back here, almost all of them, right? So these are people who are here, don't go overseas. You need both the military that goes overseas and the military that stays here. As the numbers drop, you can't do the balancing act anymore, and something has to give. So either we give up a region of the world, or we give up doing certain kinds of missions. We won't have air superiority. Haven't had an American killed due to enemy air action in about 70 years. Not in Korea, not in Vietnam. I think it got shot down over North Vietnam, but none of our guys on the ground got shot at from the air, not in the Middle East. Imagine what happens if that isn't true anymore. Haven't lost a ship to hostile surface action. We've had some to mines, we've had some shot up by missiles, but not to anything else. But imagine what happens when you have the Chinese who now have a ship-killing ballistic missile, only one in the world. Not ours, theirs. So when you start thinking about this military, why have it, why should it be of a certain size? The question comes, what response do you want when you dial 911? Right? For this local group here, right? Look around you. Which of your neighbors do you not want the police to respond to because they're responding to you and there's nobody left to respond to them? That's the reality we're facing. We're at the point where we're going to potentially have to choose to give part of the world up. If it's Asia, you want it to give it up, it's going to be to the Chinese. If it's Eastern Europe, it's going to be to the Russians. If it's the Middle East, well, is there anybody good there you'd really want to trust that region to? But that's the reality if the U.S. walks away, if the vacuum is incurred, and if there isn't somebody we can trust to take our place. And let me tell you, there's nobody other than the United States to keep that vacuum filled. And let me stop there. Thank you very much. You know, we used to have a robust industrial base. You can remember the plants that we built during World War II. There were Ford Motor did this, all the rest. There were, at one time, really, at the end of the Cold War, 20 major U.S. firms. Most of these firms have multiple plants, engaged in primary production. They were making aircraft. We had 5 makers of fighter planes, 3 of bombers, 6 of surface ships, 2 even of nuclear surface ships. So 20 major companies and thousands of medium and small size ones. There are now 6 major U.S. defense firms. And when I say U.S. defense firms, one of them is British Aerospace, BAE Systems, which is actually the U.S. side of a company that's actually based in the United Kingdom. So you can say literally 5 and 1. That's it. That's it. In addition, this is an industrial base that doesn't have enough money to do it well. I've talked to people in the industrial base about investing their own money. And any of you who are in business, companies look at you and go, is there going to be any business after I invest my money in a new product? And you go, no, I don't know if there's going to be anything. Do it for the good of the country. They kind of look at you. I don't think my board of directors is going to like me investing corporate money when there's no return on the investment. That's the world we're now in. We have 1 fighter plane, 2 fighter planes in production, 1 about to go out of production. We'll have 1 fighter plane in production. We are going to try and build a new bomber if the program goes through. That's going to be the only large new aircraft program in the United States. We haven't designed, and we have designed to produce 1 new destroyer called the Zumwalt class, DDG 1000. We're only building 3 of them because it was too expensive. We've gone back and we're building new versions of the old ships. In addition, most of the inventions, most of the really neat stuff in technology don't come from government, don't come from government-funded investments. They come from Silicon Valley, all the kind of stuff, small companies, medium companies, the private sector. And the problem is this administration in particular and this Department of Defense are at war with the private sector. They treat the industrial base. I'm talking about companies who have been in the defense business for generations. Lockheed Martins, Northrop Grumman's, Boeing's, Raytheon's, I can go on with, as enemies. Not as the indispensable arm of a strong national security, but as price gouging enemies. And let me tell you, I mean, I've studied this. You got to be out of your mind to do business with the federal government if you don't have to. For defense, you have special requirements. You have to have a whole separate accounting system. All the things that any of you in business do in accounting, general acceptable practices, not for the Department of Defense. You have to account, if you're in the commercial side of the business selling to the Defense Department, you have to account for the costs and prices of all your goods. So if you're selling to somebody else as a middleman, and that somebody is selling to somebody else, and that last person is selling on the other side of the world at a discount, and you don't sell to the federal government at that same discount, you're in violation of the law. you not only have to sell it, you have to track all that information. So if you're a private company that hasn't done business with the government, and you've got this neat technology, oh, by the way, one more thing about neat technology. Government may take the rights to that intellectual property too. Okay? So if you're Silicon Valley, you're Apple, you're any of the Oracle, and you get told there may be no production contract, so you can just do this for the fun of it. You have to have a new accounting system and pay for that. You have to build it to government specifications no matter how idiotic they are. And by the way, we may come 10 years from now and demand that intellectual property and just take it. You got to be out of your mind to do business with the federal government. So I mean, God bless all those companies that are still doing it. They're still doing it because they're patriotic. But let me tell you, it's getting real thin in the defense industrial world. And if they stop producing, we can have the largest military on earth. We can have everybody. We'll sign all you up, put you all in uniform. It won't matter. We will lose the next war.